I'm a Jew and a comedian and a creative and all of those things. So, and free speech and all those. Like, I advocate for all those principles and ideas. And there's a huge risk of looking totally hypocritical when calling out Dave Chappelle or addressing or criticizing any of the things he's saying. But I don't think I am at all. And I'm going to be critical, but I can defend it, I think, well, with seemingly at the risk of looking hypocritical, but not actually being hypocritical, and I can defend it.
I'm curious to hear that and also throw in how this is any different than the trans stuff that you supported him with.
I've thought about it.
All right,
I did support him through that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Showed up at his house. You wrote him letters.
I supported him through that.
Yeah.
Let me say off the bat, as everybody knows, you and I are modern Orthodox Jews, okay? I like Jewish jokes from non-Jewish comedians. I like racial jokes, controversial jokes, Holocaust jokes about any subject, any topic. I don't think anything is off limits.
You have a good Holocaust joke?
Yeah. I don't have a good Holocaust joke. Handy.
Okay.
And I certainly, given the situation and everything, maybe for right now in this episode, I won't try to find one.
It's not the right time.
But I like them all.
Okay.
Provided that they're jokes. There's sort of this unspoken rule of stand-up comedy for people who get it and aren't there to protest when you're in the club or you're going to see a show or an act, that you're going to watch somebody make jokes. So it's like what Bill Burr used to say. It's like, don't tell me they're real statements. You know, you're writing this blog post like it's a real statement, like I meant the joke. Come on. And I totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whether somebody is, succeeds or fails at the joke, at least there's that person that he or she is still attempting to make a joke and find the funny in something tragic or sad or awful or horrific, but we're trying to find the funny in it so we can all laugh at it together. We can celebrate each other's differences. We can joke about each other and be loose and fun. And I'm all for that. And to me, if a joke bombs, then obviously it gets interpreted as more hurtful and more offensive because you didn't get the laugh, which is what's required in order for something not to hurt. Mm-hmm. But that's like sitting with somebody and making a joke at them and you actually hurt their feelings. That can happen sometimes if you don't read it right, and comedians take that risk, and I think they should be able to. And you and I are both huge fans of Dave Chappelle, and he's a brilliant, amazing comedian, one of the GOATs, best of all time.
Not just a great comedian, but a great social commentator.
Okay. So on that point,
he has evolved into something different than a comedian.
So on that point, provided that they're jokes. Now, I think in the situation with the trans community, in the beginning, at least when it was starting out, what I was hearing were jokes. And then he was getting attacked for making jokes. And then he responded to those attacks on him and attempted cancellations with points to be made and commentary.
But not just with that, also with the I can't believe I'm blanking on the name. The guy who was killed by, I remember the cop's name, Derek Chauvin. George Floyd. Yeah. He came out with a special called like 8.5 Minutes.
Yes, that was. But so he was commenting on that.
Yeah,
but he wasn't.
There were no jokes in there.
Yeah, no. So he's had his areas where he's doing more commentary. That I understand, but I'm just talking about. I'm about to compare the trans situation, I guess, to what happened with the monologue and what's going on here. That's where I'm going with it, and why I don't think it's hypocritical.
Okay.
That in one case I was okay with it, and in one case I wasn't.
Okay.
Because I'm gonna say, and I don't want to say wasn't because that's like a blanket statement too. I can state sort of my position on the monologue in a minute, but I guess maybe I'm going backwards. But I don't want to get into the weeds of it all. Cool. But in any event. I felt like in a lot of the trend, especially where he was making jokes, he's making jokes, yes. And they're like, he's punching down, he's doing. I'm like, no, he's making jokes. He's making jokes about everybody. In this case, making jokes about one group. Everybody should be able to take a joke. And I guess comedy is subjective. And I'm making that point that it's subjective. And if you don't like it, you don't have to watch it. But to protest and cancel, that's kind of ridiculous. And then if he's responding with serious points because you're attacking him and you're canceling him, that's a different story. But to me, they were very clearly jokes, even though comedy's subjective the way I looked at them.
Okay.
And to the monologue, fast forward to the monologue, which was Jewish-centered and Jew-centered, I was laughing in the beginning. Like, I have mixed feelings about it because he made jokes about Jews. I don't say that because he made jokes about Jews, there was problems in it. It's when all of a sudden, at some point in the monologue, he wasn't making jokes anymore. it seemed to be more like he was making commentary or serious points. And once you go there, the standard seems to change. I'm like, am I watching a stand-up comedy act in which you're attempting to get laughs, and maybe you are, maybe you aren't, or are you trying to like have some social commentary and make some serious points in which now I'm supposed to respond genuinely or seriously? You know what I mean? And that seems to be what's being invited. And my critique of the act was, and this is a critique, it's not a cancellation. I don't think he should be canceled or punished or those kinds of things. It can spark a dialogue, but I did have problems with what was going on in the monologue on the specifics. You know, like there were certain things that were very clearly jokes. And then when he gets into when he started to make certain topics like, you know, Jews have been through horrible things, but you can't blame that on African Americans. You just can't. No one's doing that. Right? I found that weird. But there are a lot of African Americans, at least through the Kanye and Kyrie channels, that are supporting blaming everything on the Jews. So there just didn't seem to be a balanced. There were things in there that I think it could have used more balance. And I could get into the details of it, but it's not like the Jewish community is claiming that their suffering is the fault of the African American community, but there seemed to be, and based on our last episode, a lot of people in that community claiming that a lot of the problems happening there are the fault of Jews. And
but that kind of line isn't so unusual for him to throw in sort of a something that sounds profound. That's not a joke. He does that in his sets all the time.
Yes, but I'm saying,
not
given
just in response to like the trans stuff, like out of set, like within the set, he'll throw a line, but like but you know, like he'll say things like that.
I understand, but if he's going there, then what I think it's fair to sort of have a critical lens on what he's talking about. And then we're talking about not criticizing it from a comedic standpoint. The joke didn't work, the joke did not work. Then it's like, okay, you're making a point here.
Right.
And now we're talking a little bit more on a serious plane. Okay, if we want to talk more profound, I get it. I'm not saying he's not allowed. He's allowed to do that within his act. But now we're changing we're moving the goalpost a little to say, okay, so what are you saying now? Because what has happened in the context is that Kanye West made crazy anti-Semitic statements, and Kyrie Irving posted a link to a movie which is really problematic and full of anti-Semitic tropes. Okay, what should happen to them? It's one question. How should we respond to that? We've talked about that a lot. How should we react? Should we punish them? I liked what Jon Stewart was saying. It's like, it's not going to help. We're not going to change people's thoughts by punishing them. Fine. But it's like Dave Chappelle, I get it. It was not like he was agreeing with them per se, but you know, and there was parts of it where he was like, they're crazy, but I get why they think that way. You know, he was sort of
I picked up on that.
You know, that he's saying, I get why you think that way. He's like, but that I watched it twice. So the first time I was like, what? But then I'm losing my train of thought because it was so fresh to me when it happened. But then when he starts to sort of validate their feelings without offering a strong enough counter. I know he said, and you know, there are a lot of black people in Ferguson, Missouri. Doesn't mean they run the place. But, you know, I don't know, like, there was just something that was sort of imbalanced about it. And then to close with whoever they are was just like, okay, we went out of the joke range. I liked when he said about mafia, Italian. Like, I liked a lot of the jokes and I'm laughing. But then it reaches this point where, you know, he's validating their feelings and he's not really working hard to dispel them.
Yeah. I felt, even I think if you can't maybe like break down his set to explain exactly why, I also heard like a dog whistle in there. The same way I heard in Russell Simmons' response, and like I've heard in a lot of responses, like in Whoopi Goldberg's response, like the same thing of like, okay, I'll stop saying it, but doesn't mean I don't believe it. I heard that also in there, and that was pretty uncomfortable. Yeah,
and it's very revealing that, you know what, a lot of people have this myth narrative idea about, in maybe Jay Chappelle shedding light on the fact that people in the black community feel this way, and the African American community feel this way about Jewish people, and that can spark an interesting dialogue and and it can validate what we've been saying, that maybe just this whole slap on the wrist doesn't work. But I'm just saying, I don't know. The more I sat with it, I don't think we're just looking at jokes anymore. Yeah. That's what I mean. It's not, and I'm not saying we should cancel him. I'm just saying we're not evaluating what was performed as just a comedic set.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden he's making profound, serious points, then we're responding a little bit differently. It's resonating differently. And, Kanye said horrible things. And he made jokes about that. I think he did a good job unpacking that. Then he went to bed. And I don't want to go through the whole act. It's funny. In the beginning, it's very funny. But then he starts to go into well, but look, there's a lot.
Well, he's doing
a lot.
He's doing the Jon Stewart thing that always annoyed both of us, where do you want to be a social commentator or do you want to be a comedian and make people laugh?
Right.
It seems like you're doing both. He did that whole special where he just called out the executives at Comedy Central who stole, who he kind of claimed stole his IP and then wouldn't give it back to him. That was a protest set that he did. That was but
that was fine in terms of there was nothing racial about that.
No. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying. Don't just say I'm just a comedian when you're gonna do something like that too. So when you do something like that and you do 8.5 minutes or whatever it was about George Floyd, and then you do a monologue on SNL, we don't just look at you like you're a comedian. You're not whoever, I don't even know, Sebastian Maniscalco getting up there, you're someone people look to understand what's going on in the country.
Right.
So it matters what you say about this, and I think people wanted him to make sense of it to them.
Right.
To be some kind of conduit between the Jewish community and the Black community, and he sort of wasn't. He was sort of nah, I'm in Kanye's camp on this one, guys. I'm just not gonna say it. I'm a little bit gonna defend him a little bit. And explain him to all of you.
Yeah.
And I'm not really gonna tear down what he said.
So if you watch it carefully, and since he's dealing with such a delicate, fresh, raw topic, right? It's very sensitive and requires every beat and sentence sort of matters. So even just this is almost a comedic critique because he's doing a monologue in the form of stand up in some way. If he had just said, "Now look, there's a lot of Jews in Hollywood, a lot. Don't get me wrong." But that doesn't mean we run the play. If he had said it like that feels different to me than a lot. Long pause.
Yeah.
Sit with it. And then I know I'm getting into the weeds of it, but the reason is if we're now establishing that we're evaluating this as serious commentary and serious points to be made, and in a way comedy always has an undertone of that. I'm not saying he can't say what he said. I hear myself saying this, and I don't think it's hypocritical though, because I think in a lot of ways, because I like a good Jewish joke that digs at Jews from in jest. It's almost like when your friend's joking around with you, and then all of a sudden starts saying something that's not a joke, and you're like, So I think that's what happened here. You're like, shit, this is good, dude.
Yeah.
Hey, you realize what just given the context of what just happened. And I heard Judy Gold speak about this on CNN because she just wrote a book about free speech and what comedians. Yes, I can say that. And they were asking Judy Gold on CNN, what did you think? He's like, well, I like Dave. Dave is
Did Elon transition? Who is that?
No. No, Judy. You know who Judy Gold is?
No.
Not Elon Gold, but Judy Gold. She is another been in the game a long time. Yeah. Jewish female comedian.
A tall woman?
Tall redhead.
I think it was on Louis.
Redhead or blonde. She's been on Louis.
Yeah, old school.
Yeah, old school.
Yeah.
She's like, listen.
90s comic.
So she said, listen, Dave's a friend. He's a really nice guy, but I have to admit, as a comedian, I liked some of it. I was laughing, but then it made me a little uncomfortable. Jews have it really hard. And it's not easy for us. I don't think she said Jews have it really. I'm not quoting, but she was like, it's not an easy time for us. I have to admit it. Parts of it made me a little uncomfortable. What are you getting at here? So she's hinting at I was laughing through it, and then you're just and then even certain lines, she's like, even when he said, about Jewish suffering not being the responsibility or the fault of the African American community, she's like, and nobody reacted or knew what to do because no one is saying that. So it didn't really resonate. It didn't really work, that line, because no one is saying that has happened. No one is making that claim. So that seemed disingenuous. It's that's not the issue here. The issue is not that Jews are claiming that the African community are responsible for their suffering. It's quite the contrary is what the problem is. Kanye is out there saying that I'm going DEFCON 3 on the Jews. Yeah. They're responsible for my suffering and our suffering, and we got to call it out. And I've seen so many comments making commentary on this subject, and people are saying the most viciously disgusting anti-Semitic things and made up stuff about Jews, like libels. It's libel out there.
And to have such a twisted perception of that calls into question his whole understanding of the whole thing, which calls into question his authority to make a joke about it.
Yeah.
If he really doesn't quite understand what's going on.
Yeah, I think a lack of I don't know. There seemed to be something missing, at least a sensitivity to the issue and like the history of anti-Semitism. It's not his responsibility. He's making jokes from his perspective to the best of his ability. But there just didn't seem to be enough of that balance of like everybody can laugh together at this, guys, because we all agree. And now that I hear it and I watched it a second time, there were parts of it where you can qualify a lot of the statements. He does say Kanye went a little crazy, and I liked his joke when he said like, the two words you can never say together, the Jews. Nothing could ever happen after the words, the Jews. Nothing. But it's so clearly like we're joking here about this, and that's a good joke. But then he goes, but I get it. Yeah. There's a moment he's like, but I get it.
Well, so not in his defense, but I guess the reason I'm so proud of what we did with Harry is that if people do believe this thing, we have to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And like and we have to we have to be able to say there are a lot of Jews in media, and it does look weird, and there are Jews who have taken advantage of black artists, and that's fucked up, and we don't support that, and we don't defend that, and we have to be able to say that because they're gonna believe it whether or not we say it.
But you have to be careful when you claim that guy's one of ours, and we have to take responsibility for some guy named Rabinowitz who's an executive. Why do we have to take responsibility for that?
Because they're blaming us for it. Right. So it is our responsibility whether or not we want to take it.
Yeah. Okay. Because it gets being attributed to the Jews broadly.
Yeah.
Because of these behaviors.
And we have to be able to say. There's a part of it that I think does fall on our shoulders. What I like about Harry is he's able to just listen to what they're saying, and within like when someone's having a manic episode or something, and they come to you with a crazy claim, you have to respond to them within their craziness. Like you can't keep trying to talk them down of like Hitler's not your father. Hitler you have to you can't bring them back to reality.
Who said that?
Well, let's just say someone's having an episode like, I think Hitler's my father. Like,
I understand. You have to talk to them where they're at.
Okay, so Hitler's your father. When was he born and when were you born? And deal with it, right? So they're saying Jews. So okay, Jews run the media. Like, tell me, how does that work? And why is that my fault?
As opposed to. Yeah, no, listen. You don't agree or validate, but by confronting it, meeting them where they're at, and then you can kind of gradually untangle that myth and that narrative. I understand.
Exactly. So in his defense, it's something he probably does believe, and that's and I think it seeps through his set, no matter, and even out of his control, and we need to be able to talk to him about it.
The hardest part was that he closed again with it, and it didn't quite have a satisfying note to it. It had a weird eerie note. But
he believes it.
If you watch it carefully, word for word, I watched it a second time just to give myself another shot at it. To see how it hit the first time and the second time. He says, if you spend all this time or whatever, you might have the delusional belief that the Jews control everything, but you don't say it out loud, and that's the joke. We all delusional beliefs you don't say out loud. Delusional beliefs you keep to yourself. It's just what got tucked under a lot of things, and I just think it wasn't the masterful delivery everybody's talking about. That was served as the referee between the communities. I don't think it was. And that's my critique of it. Obviously, I'm not going out there claiming that he's hateful, and none of that. I think that's nonsense, and I don't think he should be canceled. But this needs to be talked about because it revealed a blind spot.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, Harry just went on this hip hop show, and they brought that claim against him, and I thought he had a really good response to it, and it was a nice sort of refreshing. What's that word? Where you're it was a relieving moment when they were
cathartic?
Actually cathartic. Yeah, it was a nice cathartic moment. Yeah. Instead of becoming this fight. I think they said all these Jewish executives have been promoting black Americans selling drugs and killing each other.
Right.
And he's like, well, are there no hip hop labels that are owned not by Jews, and they're still putting out that music, and they were basically
Spotify
no.
is run by a Swedish guy. I mean, saying
whatever is, but it was so nice for him to be yeah, that does happen, but let's talk about how valid the claim is that it's our fault.
Whether there's a disproportionate amount of Jews in a particular industry is fine, but you're being awfully selective. One is being awfully selective when you're just saying, well, that one's owned by a Jew, and that one, but discounting all the ones who aren't. Yeah, well, and I'm not denying maybe that there's a disproportion, but then to make this leap that there's some grand conspiracy or that everyone is partial and involved in putting out this stuff. And then I have another argument against that, which is the culture vulture argument. That's what Charlemagne the God said. Aren't you a culture vulture? There's a viral clip going around of this guy who did not do a good job. I think an executive. He's on Breakfast Club, and they're like, "Aren't you a culture vulture then?"
What's a culture vulture?
A culture vulture. You're somebody who's like using our culture and destroying it and putting it out there to make money and all that. I think that's what it means. I think Charlemagne's like, "Aren't you a culture vulture?" It's like because he goes like, he was saying how like that what's being like put out there in hip hop is destructive and agreeing with them about that. But then they flip it on him. But then why are you like investing in these artists and developing them if you think that what they're doing is destructive? Doesn't that make you like a culture vulture? Maybe somebody who's latches onto culture destroys it. I don't really know. And then he goes, I got people to feed. It was bad. But that guy that was a bad look for this guy as an individual. And they were like, oh, he's like, listen, you're not listening, Charlemagne. You're not listening. And I'm like, well, but my argument is this. Like, let's say you assume with the best of intentions, an executive or whoever is supporting African-American artists, hip-hop artists to get their stuff out there. Like, I thought we were okay with artistic expression. And even if it's about drugs and violence and things like that, like, people are reflecting and expressing their honest experiences in their music, and it's resonating with millions of people around the world. One can argue that's an argument in the culture. Is that good? Is that bad? Does that promote lifestyle that's not good and destructive? I don't know how I feel about that because, like, to me, a song, a piece of art is just a reflective of reality. If you want to change reality and change the values that lead to that art. But the art is reflecting what's going on. It's a window into the truth, and you don't want to shut that down. And to me, it's putting the cart before the horse.
But I think that whole...
It's putting the cart before the horse, Michael.
That whole line of thinking is just like it's just fallacious, like you would say. I think Jon Stewart said it really well, where he's like, what the black community is actually saying is like, we feel like we've been exploited. And like and we want someone to do something about it.
Right.
And like I think the only response to that is like yeah, you have been exploited. You know, we also feel exploited. Like we're you're right. There's a million ways to discredit their argument and tear it apart, but that's not the point. The point is like listening and sharing in that with them and like showing that like we aren't the ones victimizing you.
But right, but do you think there's also a search